This is your host, Gabe Morales, coming back at you with another informative episode, this time on Public Enemy Number One, which is an expansion of my previous Aryan Brotherhood videos. Public Enemy Number One, also known by its acronym PENI, started out in Long Beach, California around 1986. This skinhead group named itself after a 1980s British punk rock band called Rudimentary PENI, who are known for their dark-themed lyrics. PENI quickly expanded its base into Orange County in the late 1980s to early 90s, where many young middle-class and relatively poor whites felt under attack, in particular by Hispanic and Southeast Asian gangs that flourished there. While they originally formed as a social and self-protection group, they were soon involved in assaults, robberies, theft, fraud, property crimes, and methamphetamine sales. PENI were also known to be heavy meth users, commonly known as tweakers, as seen in this video.
Also known as the PENI Death Squad, law enforcement intelligence says the gang is increasing recruitment efforts in the ranks of white supremacist skinheads. And as we see in this Fox Undercover report, the PENI is making a push for power in prisons, but also out on the streets. This dog's owner belongs to a group so taken with violence.
His name's Hitman Tank.
He jokes even his pit bull carries a sawed-off shotgun. But later, seeing the dog in action, it's arguable Tank doesn't need a weapon. He is one.
If I don't have a gat, I start bombing on somebody, my dog locks on you too. So it's a little teamwork. Good boy, Tank.
And as night falls in this remote area near Big Bear,
Myself, I have over 300 guns.
the tattooed hands of Tank's owner ready a .38 revolver,
They don't know.
quickly use it to demonstrate his murderous method. He is a shot caller in a gang called Public Enemy Number One. Mostly known as PENI, sometimes referred to as PDS, short for the PENI Death Squad. Ready to kill enemies and snitches.
I'll end up with one of these when I got 16 gauge right here. Guarantee you won't get up if I blast you, you know?
As far as we can determine, PENI started in Long Beach about 1986. A small group of teenagers stealing their name from a hardcore punk rock band called Rudimentary PENI.
Rudimentary PENI, that's how PENI started.
This PENI member, in a police tape obtained by Fox 11 News, remembers the beginning.
We were kids. I mean, we started this as kids. We were all punk rockers at Disneyland.
He is Brody Davis, a parolee who has done time for intimidating a witness. A far cry from Disneyland, he and his PENI brothers put down roots in the white supremacist skinhead movement, fertilized by hate, still blossoming into racist anger. By the early 90s, PENI had moved to Orange County, which became its main stomping grounds. Anaheim became a familiar haunt. Detective Tim Miller remembers them for auto theft, burglaries, and drug activity.
They were all into dope. Using methamphetamine was really the big thing, drug of choice.
7 grams.
Now, the drug culture runs through the veins of the PENI organization like blood,
This is what you call methamphetamines, glass.
especially methamphetamines. But in all fairness, some PENI talk against the use of drugs.
Yeah, we don't all do drugs. Do you know what a skinhead is? A skinhead is a working class man that doesn't do drugs.
Everybody wants.
But clearly,
Spade, there's number one drug.
it appears PENI use of meth is epidemic.
Everybody's on it. So all it is just crack. It's another form of crack.
And also, for PENI,
I just do this for the money.
meth is a major source of income.
So I'll do jail time, I'll do whatever I have to do to make the money, to get my coin, you know, and I live by the code of silence.
And he lives on the profits of drug sales.
Probably about $400 a day, but I'm not really pushing the issue.
He says he gets the dope from PENI buddies.
Partners make it.
For a while, they were making it here.
Manufacturing, speed.
That's until the dangerous chemicals used to make meth exploded.
We got a spark and the house went up.
Apparently, flames destroyed the cabin before firefighters and police arrived.
Well, I usually have it turned on.
These PENI often monitor police activity on a scanner.
What class?
And according to law enforcement intelligence obtained by Fox 11 News,
Put some holes in my head.
PENI are actively recruiting new members to protect their interests
Chill.
and strengthen their position among other white criminal elements.
Chill.
Department of Corrections gang officer Wes Harris.
These groups are going to start popping up everywhere, and they are extremely violent.
He says PENI sees themselves as Viking warriors, true to pagan Nordic gods, a die-on-your-shield philosophy, and no remorse. It fits well with a group that has evolved from punk rockers to racist skinheads to a gang of thugs moving into organized crime.
In this business of guns, speed, violence, and sex, that's what it's all about.
By the way, one of the main individuals shown in that video had his face hidden and voice disguise, but PENI recognized some of his tattoos and his dog and killed him for it, as I will cover here shortly in detail. Meth used by PENI created a big problem amongst other skinhead groups who were against hard drug use, as they believed it helps bring down the white race. They had no problem, however, if minorities used it to help bring down their race. PENI may use runes or other symbology like 737, which relates to letters on the old rotary dial phones, PDS, which stands for PENI Death Squad. Now, not all members will have PDS tattoos. It is my feeling that members with this designation are considered hitters, or are part of a PENI hit squad to attack enemies and former members in bad standing, and they have a lot of hitters. They may also sport typical white tattoos like 2316, which equates to WP in the alphabet for white power. PENI soon expanded from the OC into parts of the Inland Empire and San Diego County, recruiting white kids who felt the same way as the original group, and they grew to around 500 main members. That is not counting associates or girlfriends, who conduct much of the gang's business when members are locked up. Eventually, some of their members became incarcerated and they started working for the Aryan Brotherhood, putting in so much work inside and out on the streets that several PENI were made Aryan Brotherhood members. Most PENI also get along with Nazi lowriders, as discussed in the previous NLR video. And just as the NLR spread to other states in small numbers, such as Florida, so were some PENI members found outside of California. This was usually due to them moving out of state or being in the federal BOP system. Before the late 1990s, the Aryan Brotherhood had been the dominant white supremacist gang in the California prison system. However, by 2002, federal authorities had cracked down on the gang and weakened it, so the NLR and PENI became more active to do the AB's bidding, out on the main lines and out on the streets. There was an expectation among PENI members that they back each other up under any circumstances when committing violent crimes. While guns and violence are very important to the gang, white supremacist gang members generally do not commit drive-by shootings or have battles with other white gangs over turf. Instead, they tend to use firearms as an intimidation factor and as a tool to achieve violence whenever they need it. They will try to control drug sales, and sometimes violence is the result. This former Orange County investigator talks about PENI activity. So I would imagine you did encounter a lot of those groups. Was there any individuals, key individuals or leaders of those groups that you recall that you dealt with?
Well, I've been involved, I did so long. I've been involved with some of the top leadership of the Aryan Brotherhood. I've been involved and supervised some of the top leadership of the Nazi lowriders. And I know of all the leadership of Public Enemy Number One and PENI. I was on the show Gangland for them. And right. I've dealt with a lot of them and their associates over the years. And actually, I've even ran into a couple after I retired.
Here is the hierarchy at one time of the PENI, although all these leaders have now dropped out or have been killed. Donald Mazza, known as Popeye, considered to be the number one. Dominic Droopy Rizzo. Devlin Gazoo Stringfellow. Dwayne Wickard Eckert, and Christian Kip Gross. Devin Stringfellow was killed because he refused to back down from a ceasefire order by PENI on Serranos. He was also known as a loudmouth, a drug addict, and was considered to be out of control. So even though he was one of the early founders of the PENI, he had to go. The PENI can be very dangerous towards the public, former members, as well as law enforcement. Their primary focus is white supremacist ideology and the commission of crimes. The gang has an intense hatred for law enforcement, which means that a gang member status would be hugely increased by killing or severely hurting a police officer, as well as killing or hurting any PENI members in bad standing. Such was the case of murdered PENI member Scotty Miller. On March 11, 2002, Anaheim police officer Michael Helmick, then assigned to undercover auto theft detail, responded to a report of a stolen vehicle parked in an alley. He was assisted by another Anaheim police officer in a department helicopter piloted by another officer. Helmick, who was not in uniform, arrived at the scene in an unmarked police car. He quickly determined that the car, a Ford Taurus, had in fact been reported stolen, and he requested the assistance of a backup Anaheim detective. Helmick saw suspect Jacob Rump, later identified as PENI, drive the car out of the alley. Helmick followed the car and Rump spotted him. Fellow suspect Michael Lamb, also PENI, ran out and got into the stolen vehicle. After Lamb got into the car, Rump made an abrupt U-turn and drove directly towards Helmick's car. Helmick tried to block the car, but Rump drove over a curb to avoid stopping and accelerated. The stolen car eventually collided with the parked car. Helmick got out of his vehicle and pursued Rump and Lamb on foot, and they ran into an apartment complex. As they entered the complex, Helmick noticed a black jacket on the ground that looked like the jacket that Lamb had been carrying. Helmick and the assisting officer had their guns drawn and were in the process of clearing the stairway when Lamb stood up on the balcony, reached over the railing, and fired a shot at Officer Helmick from the distance of about 10 feet. The two officers fled for cover while Lamb continued pointing the gun at the top of the stairs. While sitting in a crouched position, he began fiddling with the gun. Rump, who had been lying on his back, repeatedly kicked the wall of the balcony. Both officers yelled, "Police officers," several times. They told Lamb that he was surrounded and directed him to drop the gun and to surrender. Approximately a minute later, Lamb leaned over the balcony and threw the gun down below, walked down the stairs, and was taken into custody. As additional officers arrived at the scene, they ordered Rump to surrender himself. And several minutes later, Rump, who was now limping, came downstairs and was also taken into custody. The subsequent investigation found that the gun Lamb dropped turned out to be the same Browning 9mm single-action handgun that was loaded with 10 rounds of live ammunition, including 6 hollow-point bullets and 4 Supervel bullets that had been used in a March 8th homicide just a few days earlier of PENI member Scott Miller. Rump and Lamb's hands were tested for gun residue. Rump had no traces of gunshot residue on his hands at the time of his arrest, but Lamb had 2 unique gunshot residue particles on his right hand. After the arrest, Lamb and Rump were placed in adjoining cells. They shouted back and forth to each other, and their statements were recorded. The gist of the conversation was they did not know that the 2 cars that tried to stop them were unmarked police cars. But Lamb told them not to worry because a public defender can fucking beat this case. Throughout the conversation, Lamb and Rump called each other homie and comrade. When a sergeant tried to interview Lamb, Lamb yelled, "Hold on, I got to tell him I ain't got nothing to say." When the officer told him he was being held for attempted murder, Lamb told the officer that he did not know he was shooting at a police officer and that he was afraid for his life. In the days following the arrest, Lamb and Rump made several telephone calls from the Orange County Jail. The calls were recorded as is usually announced on all normal outgoing jail and prison phones for security purposes, and both incriminated themselves while talking to other parties on the line. Lamb and Rump also wrote dozens of letters while awaiting trial. Mail was also screened in prison and jail, as is commonly known. On one occasion, Rump wrote to Lamb and said that he had joined the family, meaning the PENI. In another letter to Lamb, Rump wrote, "And next time, I ain't stopping. We're driving straight to hell." Rump also wrote a letter to PENI leader Donald Mazza, who was awaiting trial when the victim Scotty Miller's interview aired on television. Rump complained because he felt that Mazza had been neglecting him and referred to himself as the finest specimen of the P, hate this side of the Rio Grande. He also expressed that while his own journey had just begun, Mazza's journey had been ongoing. In a letter to another female friend, Rump referred to himself as one of the finest skinheads in Orange County, and that he was from the infamous ones. In a second letter, he wrote, "The infamous ones are the first and still the biggest skinhead gang in Orange County and in the LA area, PENI Death Squad. Come on now, silly. I know you've heard of us." In November 2002, a PENI informant set up a meeting between himself and law enforcement officials. He told police officers that Lamb stood outside his cell door and quietly told him how he whacked Scottish, being Scotty Miller, and that he had his stripes coming for that. When the informant asked Lamb how he had done the crime, Lamb stated that he shot Miller in the back of the head. The informant was placed in secure housing protective custody until the trial, when he testified that he had been jumped into PENI in the early 1990s while he was serving a sentence in the Orange County jail. He was a member in good standing until 2002 when Donald Popeye Mazza, the leader of the gang, who was standing trial at the time, and he wanted PENI to stop recruiting new members. When the informant refused to follow this order, the gang's leadership put him in the hat, which means that he was targeted for violence. He knew that Scotty Miller was considered one of the gang's founding members. He also knew that Miller was in the hat because of the TV interview. Rump and Lamb were eventually found guilty in the 2007 first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and committing murder for the benefit of a gang. After the jury deliberated for 10 days, Lamb, the triggerman, was sentenced to death. Rump got life without parole. 11 sheriff's deputies stood guard in the courtroom while the verdict was read, as there was real concerns about court security. The jury found that the pair ambushed Scott Miller approximately 1 year after he participated in the TV interview, in which he revealed information about the gang, including its drug trafficking activities. Miller also brought his pet bull to the interview, and the dog was clearly visible in the video, as well as some of his distinct tattoos. It was later discovered that Billy Joe Johnson, who sported a Mohawk-style haircut and was not charged with killing Miller until 2007, when he got on the witness stand in Lamb and Rump's trial and testified that he acted alone in the slaying. Billy Joe Johnson was a former Nazi lowrider turned PENI, and he stated that he bumped into Scotty Miller at a birthday party for Johnson's cousin in Costa Mesa when he suggested that Miller keep his guard up due to the rumor of a PENI hit out on him. He also suggested that they drive to nearby Anaheim to cop some dope, which was all set up. But evidence did not show that he fired the fatal shots. It is believed that Johnson lied on the witness stand in order to make himself out to be a martyr for the gang. But Johnson still got what he wanted when he was sentenced as being an accomplice in the case. And since he had priors, he got his wish, death row. And so ended the saga of three PENI who wanted to make a name for themselves, but ended up ruining their lives and the lives of many others. In late 2006, law enforcement arrested 57 members and associates of PENI after it was discovered that an Orange County prosecutor and 5 police officers were on one of their hit lists. Now, cops don't like it when you plot to attack them for murder. Bad move on PENI's part. 4 years later, 50 more PENI and associates were arrested along with NLR and AB during Operation Stormfront, a play off a popular racist website. In 2019, several AB, NLR, and PENI were arrested and charged in a RICO case involving multiple crimes, including 5 murders, and you could say at least 1 suicide, that of Matt Cycle Hall, who killed himself shortly after his arrest in Central America. PENI founder and former leader Donald Popeye Mazza agreed to testify in that case and took a plea bargain. With many PENI now falling out of favor with the AB, the popular YouTuber Powder, it is unknown what their future role will be, and if a new gang leader will step up, or if they'll fade out into the history books, and a new gang will be favored by the Aryan Brotherhood to be their pawns. I hope you enjoyed this brief overview and coverage of some of the major players in the PENI organization. Let me know if you have any recollections of others left out, or additional information in the comments section. I have more information on PENI and other white prison gangs in my book, The History of the Aryan Brotherhood, available on Amazon.com. Thanks for watching. This is Gabe Morales signing off for Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians.